Welcome, everybody. My name is Walter Edwards. I'm the director of the Humanities Center, and this is a sort of very iconic kind of talk for the center, because we have collaborating on this paper a scholar from art and art history, one from linguistics, one from education, one from languages, all coming together to talk about interdisciplinary collaboration from furniture to space. It's a wonderful idea of collaboration, since the center's mission is to encourage interdisciplinary collaboration. So thank you all for doing that. And I think this presentation comes out of the work they are doing as part of a working group on photographic representation of Detroit. And before that, 3 of these participants were part of Space of Detroit and Shenyang working groups. So it's an example of the way in which the working group program in the center has been encouraging cross-disciplinary work. But let me get to my little introductions. First, I'll introduce Marlene Zimmerwoman, who is Center for Peace and Conflict Studies Professor Emerita. She's from the College of Fine Performing and Communications Art, and she's the artist in residence for the Center for Peace and Conflict Studies. She is an intersectional, anti-censorship feminist who is an avowed trickster change agent via camera-based image making, performance, and social engagement disruption, and curation and installation, personifying a meta-Martha, a meta-Marilyn.
A Marilyn.
Yes.
A meta-Marilyn. That's like,
yes,
that's what this is about. That's like
she seeks to consolidate community, reframing the embodiment of the erotic cultural construction and capitalist consumption that her name implies into new paradigms of feminine identity and an interconnected humanitarian holism. So you see that she's a very complex person. And so Dr. Hyun Liu has been teaching at Wayne State University since 2004. He coordinates the Chinese language program in the CMLLC department and is now director of the linguistics program. He has published in academic journals in general and Chinese linguistics, on syntax, Chinese syntax, acquisition, and pedagogy. For example, his latest publication is on Chinese inalienable possession that appeared in Studies in Chinese Linguistics. Another paper written in Chinese on Chinese nominal modifications has been accepted for publication by the Journal of Formal Linguistics, which is a very prestigious journal. He has given multiple talks for the Humanities Center on his work and was once a resident scholar in the Humanities Center. Dr. Hu has published a solely authored book that received a major award from the American Educational Research Association, and she has published articles in top-tier journals in education as well as interdisciplinary journals. She is the principal investigator of a project that received National Historical Publications and Records Commission grant. And that grant was given by the National Archives and Records Administration, and is also the co-principal investigator of a grant from the Consortium of Humanities Centers and Institutes and the Chiang Ching Kao Foundation that funded a summer institute in Chinese Studies and Global Humanities here at Wayne State University in 2019. You'll hear more a little bit more of that institute as I introduce the next person, the next speaker, who is Dr. Yushang Zhang, who is an assistant professor of Chinese in the Department of Classical and Modern Languages, Literatures, and Cultures here at Wayne State University. She received her PhD in Asian Languages and Cultures from UCLA and her MA and BA degrees from Peking University in China. She specializes in literature and cultural history of the middle period of China, that is from 800 to 1400, with a focus on poetry, literati culture, and material culture. She's now working on her first book project, tentatively titled Porous Privacy, the Literati Studio, Literati Studio and Spatiality in Sung, China. It examines the distinctive significance of the studio space, an enclosed site specifically used for reading, writing, and art creation during the 10th century to the 13th century through its literary and visual representations. She has published articles on space, literati culture, and visual arts in both English and Chinese journals and edited volumes. Since joining Wayne State University in 2018, Dr. Zhang has worked with the Humanities Center closely. She is a co-PI for the grant from the Consortium of Humanities Centers and Institutes that I just mentioned, through which she organized a space in two cities summer institute with her colleagues under the support of the Humanities Center at Wayne State University. She also participated in, and is participating in 3 Humanities Centers working groups. One, Space of Detroit and Shenyang. 2, Photographic Representation of Detroit. And 3, Relating Folk and Fairy Tales to Current Crises. The talk by these 4 brilliant scholars is going to be entitled Interdisciplinary Collaboration from Furniture to Space. And I think this work emanates from the working group on photographic representation from Detroit. So with that introduction, I would like to welcome to the virtual program podium these 4 scholars.
Good. Thank you very much, Walter, for the nice introduction and also for the support we have received from the Humanities Center. So today's talk basically is based on the working group work Walter mentioned on the photographic representation of Detroit, and also based on the Summer Institute, China Summer Institute in 2019, which was also supported by the Humanities Center. And thank you very much for coming. I've seen a lot of colleagues, especially those who have collaborated with, and also our students. And okay, so let me share my screen. Share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen?
No,
Not yet.
Not yet?
Not yet.
Give me 1 second. Okay, I should share this one. And
Slide share.
can you see it now?
no. Be sure to click the green share screen button at the bottom.
Oh, share. Okay,
Mhm.
yeah. Okay.
Perfect.
Oh,
Okay, you
nice.
see it now?
Look at,
Yes.
that's lovely. Yeah, it's lovely.
All right. Okay. You can see
There's a
it.
nice
All
introduction.
right. Okay.
Oh, you should put my name, okay, last. But
All
that's
right. So,
Hmm.
so this is the talk is interdisciplinary collaboration from space to furniture, and so we have 4 speakers, including myself. And so we have Professor Zimmerwoman, who is a professor emeritus in photography, and we have Professor Yu Min from education, and also Zhang Yunshuang from my own department. So we worked for the Summer Institute together, and also we worked for the working group for photographic representation of Detroit. And so we're going to talk about our collaboration and see to say something about the benefits and the fun part and of in humanities. And also we'll conclude that actually humanities is all about interdisciplinary. It starts as an interdisciplinary unit, and we can discuss how we can maintain, encourage such collaboration. Okay, so in 2019, we are very grateful that Walter introduced us to this grant, and he told us to apply. It's by the consortium of humanities centers and institutes, and also the Chang Jingguo Foundation for International Scholarship. So we applied for it, and we got it. And we decided to make space the theme of our institute. And especially we decided, in order to really make our application a successful one, we really have to apply for something that only we have, but other institutions will not. So of course we have Detroit, and no other institution would have the perk to talk about something about Detroit. And then what about Detroit? So we thought about Shenyang, another city very similar to Detroit, used to have all the glory, the powerhouse of manufacturing, but now in the post-industrial society, Shenyang is on decline. So it has been faced with many new problems, very similar to Detroit, situation in Detroit. So we decided to talk about how space is used in Shenyang and in Detroit. And the more we are into the institute, the more we realize that space is a very interesting concept. Our life can really be reduced to a collection, a combination of space and time. So space everywhere. So when we were doing the brainstormings, we talk about space. So for example, Yunshuang Zhang, my colleague, does research on studios, art studios, literati studios in the Song Dynasty. And it's all about the space, the porous private space. And so everybody knows about the news of Detroit trying to luring Hollywood to Detroit to use the abandoned factory space and give them some tax favored policy to let Detroit use all the abandoned space in Detroit to benefit from the film industry. It didn't quite succeed, I heard. And then also we talk about space. So after we talked about our idea with our colleague in anthropology, Krista Ryzewski, and she told us that, there used to be 2 Chinatowns in Detroit. We didn't know that there were 2 Chinatowns. Even we are Chinese immigrants, we didn't know about this. So we decided that to let her give a talk on the Chinatown, the space reserved or they used to belong to the Chinatowns. And also we have, how do we name a space? Usually, we have space. Humans seems to name every space that's usable. Every street has a name. And if it's not a nameable space, it's space more like in the physical sense. So naming the space is something very interesting. And also, as a linguist, we talk about vowel space. Depending on how large you open your mouth or how small you make your mouth, you create a larger space or smaller space, you can produce different vowels. And we also in linguistics, we also talk about distance from the verb, how far away a certain item is from the verb. The distance also changes meaning. And also, so we know now it's going on that Detroit, downtown Detroit is being really facelifted. There's a lot of dismantling, and so there's really becoming more popular. But also we had a talk by a professor, Tammy, I think Tammy Force from a social work school, and she talked about what the dark side of the dismantling. A lot of people lost their affordable housing in the downtown Detroit area, and such a thing is happening in Shenyang as well. And also, so we have a professor from criminal justice talking about the criminals, before they commit a crime, they really have to watch for the space, really have to plan. So it's really space important for crimes and also for cops as well. And for gardens, you know, when we have a professor from UCLA, Dr. Shu Hui Li, give us a talk on gardening. Gardening is really manipulated with the space to create space. And how is the, you know, and that's another professor, Alina Cherry from my home department in French, she gave a talk on how the city of Detroit is represented in a French film. So in order to represent a city, a foreign city truthfully in their film, they really have to get the gist of the city. They have to summarize, they have to give people the real feeling, the truthful, authentic feeling of how Detroit is like. And also we had a guest speaker, Professor Zhang Ming from Peking University, who gave a talk about how a city is sung about in a song in the Song Dynasty. And so also we have Professor Yu Min, one of the speakers today, talking about how a space is created for for the children of migrant workers in China, or for whom otherwise they might not have a space to learn, to go through their schooling. And also we have space about, we have a professor Sheng Yumin in political science who talked about military control of a space. You know, how Chinese, the system, the military make sure that every space is under control. What is their strategy? So if you think about space, every subject has to do something with space. Basically, that's our life is all about our space. Okay, so here is the flyer of our top, two big program. So we have talks, we showed movies, we had dialogues between residents in Shenyang and residents in Detroit, and we brought visitors to the old Chinatowns. And so we had all kinds of events that go around the topic of space in the two cities, Shenyang and Detroit. And then we had a very big opening ceremony, and the dean was there, Dr. Steffi Hartwell was there, and we were lucky enough to be featured on her Twitter account. And also Dr. Walter Edwards and also Dr. Ahmed as dean helped us open the whole event. And also we got support from the Dean's Office of CLAS, of College of Education, School of Social Work, Humanities Center, the CMLC Department and Program Global Studies. It's also the collaboration and also a way for you to understand how the university works. We never worked, for example, with special events and services before, but just because of this event, now we know really we are so nicely supported by many hardworking staff. It's really heartwarming to see how people contribute and how people support the event. And so here are some pictures of, so for example, we had talks and dialogues between residents in Detroit and Shenyang. And it's very interesting, just from the dialogues, we understand that both cities are very famous for their music. We know Detroit is famous for the soul music. And also Shenyang, we learned that Shenyang produced a lot of famous musicians too, like the conductor Seiji Ozawa. He was born, although he was Japanese, was born in Shenyang. And also Ai Jing, another famous singer from China, and her hometown is Shenyang. And also we have Marvin Gaye and Aretha Franklin from Detroit. So it's very interesting. After the dialogue, we realized that two cities that are far away from another share many things in common, not only the industrial past, but also the culture, the music, the ideology, the concerns, many other things. And so we had talks So this is a talk by Professor Tammy Force on the affordable housing crisis in Detroit with the downtown development. And also we visited DIA. So we had a curator who gave us a talk, a tour of all the art collection, Asian art collections in IDIA. And then, so here are the talks. So we have Yu Minsheng talking about military regions in China. And also we had a lot of luncheons and dinners. So this is one picture from the gathering of one of the luncheons. And I want you to pay attention to the table, furniture. We'll come back to the concept of table again. So they just, all the events all the events were open to Wayne State faculty and the student and staff, and also to all the community nearby. And also we have also visitors from outside Detroit, from outside Michigan even. Okay. And so we had participants, for example, the assistant dean, I think the assistant dean of College of Education, Dr. Roland Coloma, attended our talks. And later on, at the end of the talk, we're going to talk about what kind of role he played in our collaboration. So there's a Dr. I think Yu Min talking about the creating space for migrant workers, kids' education. And then we visited the Old Chinatowns in Detroit. So this is a picture from the Old China. We were on top of the Masonic temple. That's part of the Chinatown before. The reason that there were two Chinatowns was because there was a first Chinatown, I think, closer to the Detroit River, more toward the downtown area, but it was torn down to give away to the Lodge Freeway. And then the CLAS corridor around Peterborough and the CLAS was the second Chinatown. But it was, I think the last Chinese restaurant there was closed around the end of 1990s. And now the Chinese immigrants mostly have moved to Troy. So that's why we had two old Chinatowns in the history of Detroit. And then, so this is a picture from the trip to the Chinatown, old Chinatowns. And also we showed movies. We showed one movie that was called 铁西区, which 铁西区 used to be an industrial city in Shenyang. But after the manufacturing business went bankrupt, so the government dismantled the whole district. And then the social problem of how we would assign housing to the former factory workers was documented in this documentary. It's 9 hours long. So we showed the movie in 3 sections. And then we showed another documentary about Detroit called Detroit 4202. It's about the postman, his story seeing how the city had changed from his experience delivering mails. You know, he would see a lot of mails was no longer be able to reach the recipients because they had moved away for different reasons. And then, so that's our summer institutes. We got the first glimpse of the miracle of a collaboration. And then, so after that, we were thinking maybe we should do, actually, although we all have been living in Detroit for a long time, we just learned that there are so many things about Detroit that we didn't know. So we applied, some of the attendees applied for the Humanities Center's working group grant, and we included Professor Zimmerwoman. And so we wanted to have a group called Photographic Representation of Detroit. And then, so for me, I offered a course on photographic representation of Detroit, Chinese immigrants in Detroit, mainly for Chinese students. So I think because now photography is really changing, everybody has a cell phone, everybody is a photographer. So the younger generation's view of the world, or the view of recording the world, is quite different. So really, we want to take good advantage of the cell phone they have in their hand. And also, because they are Chinese majors or minors, we want to train them to watch, to observe, to think about the Chinese immigrants in America. And also, we attracted one photography major as well. So we have Randy Asuwa, who is in here. I saw Randy too. And he was interested in bringing his photography skills to this class, and also to talk with to learn more about the Chinese community. the history of the Chinese community. So we have talks by Professor Ryzewski from anthropology and also from Professor Zimmerwoman. They talked about photographic skills. What does that mean to take a picture? What's the art behind photography? What's the purpose of photography? And Ryzewski talked about the history of the Chinatowns. So here are some pictures of our students. I think I saw Ashandi too. I think there's a picture by Ashandi, one of the students talking about. So here is a picture of the relics of old Chinese restaurant, Cheng's restaurant, one of the very famous earliest Chinese restaurants in Detroit, but now we can only see the facade of the former restaurants. And she took a picture to show the contrast between today's Detroit in the warm color and also the old Chinatowns in kind of a cooler color. So, and this is Ashandi herself. I think it's a very interesting picture. So this is the facade of Chang's restaurant. And so she took a picture of herself wearing lemon-colored yellow bright jacket, and there's graffiti on the walls in lemon. I think it's a very interesting picture of Ashandi. And this is the picture of the old Chinese restaurant, Chang's restaurant. So it's a history and past, younger generation, the relics, warm and cold. So it's all about the students got a chance to think about development and the history of a certain immigrant group. And this is another picture, I think this is by Jennifer, and she took pictures. So when the class started in the last March, the pandemic started as well. So she took pictures of how Chinese immigrants waited outside the Chinese grocery store in Madison Heights. And this is a picture taken by Randy of a Chinese restaurant during the pandemic. So it's express Chinese food, okay? And this is another picture by, I think by Jennifer, about, you still can see there's a relic of a payphone in Chinatown, and Ashandi using her cell phone. So the interesting contrast between the old payphone, unusable, and the popular mobile phone. And there's another picture, I think, by Ashanti, of her fellow classmate taking picture of her, and of the old Chinese trade union in China, in Old Chinatown, I think on Peterborough Street. Okay, and so this is the photographic class. And just last week before this talk, so New York Times reported. Had an article about 28 Asian and Asian American photographers taking pictures of their everyday life. I think it might be very interesting and relevant to our talk today. So for example, I just posted two of the pictures that I find interesting. One is about Korean families. The parents cooking plenty of food, more than enough food for the first generation daughter. It's very Asian. But you can, from her expression, you can tell that she doesn't seem to be feel quite fit in to the Asian family. The family about eating is so important in every Asian family. And also, again, the table. And another picture is about a couple. The husband is the son of a Japanese and American immigrants, and he grew up in Japan. And the wife is also a daughter of Japanese and American. And also she grew up in Japan too. And then they both immigrated to America, and they got married. So it's really interesting. Although they are both Japanese American, their life trajectories are quite different from their parents. So they use a camera to show how their lives are different yet connected to their parents. Okay, so again, we have a table here, okay? And this is just something about table. I just found this. It's just Asian cooking at the table. So dinner table is such a very important thing for every Asian family. It's all around the table, but also it's an opportunity that the kids get educated, get roasted by the family. It's very typical. I feel that I've been there, done that. It's just very familiar to me. Okay. And then we visited the Walter Reuther Library for Chinese archives. To our surprise, we had a very big collection of Chinese materials that we knew nothing about in the Walter Reuther Library. So really, collaboration can help you discover the trove of treasures on our campus. So for example, we have Randy. This is Randy who is here too. He was checking out the video about the history of Chinatowns. And this is Randy's picture of the Chinese trade union in the Chinatown. Okay. And then we also organized the students to visit Chicago. There was the Allure Matter Material Art from China in Chicago art exhibit. So we were there, the students, so we after knowing something about the history of the Chinese community, we learned something about contemporary Chinese art. So the students were practicing calligraphy. And also this is a picture of Professor Zimmerwoman in front of a yurt-like thing. And all the yurt is made of human hair. The artist purchased the human hair from around the world, and he dyed the hair, and he created his own art. And the message is that despite our differences, our being different, belonging to different ethnic groups, when we can still work together to be part of the art. And also, so Professor Zimmerwoman will talk about later about hair. Is something else we learned about hair. It's very interesting. We talk about dinner table and about hair. You know, sure, hair can be very important in terms of culture. You know, Dr. Zimmerwoman told me about her being one of the very few white girls in a primarily African-American community, how she felt about her hair. And also I remember there was two famous documentaries about how African-Americans dealing with their hair. So there's one documentary called Our Hair Heritage, a natural hair documentary about the culture represented from the hairdos. So it's a part of the culture too. All right. And then, so also it's very interesting. After talking with Professor Zimmerwoman, I realized that focus is a very important in photography. You know, you have to focus, sharp focus, quick focus, and a lot of cameras, the mechanics behind cameras is focused around focusing, how to make the camera capture a moving subject, how to make the picture crispy. So focusing is very important for photography. And then the discussion made me feel about focus in language. If you think about every language has a way to focus. You know, in English, you have Walter Edwards who invited us to the talk. So Professor Walter Edwards is focus. And Chinese has similar structure too. So it makes you feel focus is interesting. It's not only independently developing photography or linguistics, it seems to be a very essential need for human cognition just to focus. And we all know, so also I learned that babies couldn't know how to focus with their eyes until they are 6 months old or pretty late. They really had to learn how to focus, how to set their eye on the thing that makes sense to them. So let's focus something that we discovered that photography and linguistics both focus on focus. But also interestingly, in English, focus in photography, focus in linguistics, and also focus like in study and focusing on my math exam, you have the same word, but in Chinese, we have 3 different words for the focus. That's why I never connected focus in photography and focus linguistics. And then furniture. So this is a picture taken by Randy from the Chinese classroom at Wayne State. So every Chinese person will tell you, this looks very Chinese, this piece of furniture. The style, it's very, I don't know much about Chinese art. Dr. Zhang can correct me if I'm wrong. It looks very Ming style. Ming style is really minimal, simple. It doesn't intend to be comfortable. You can tell it wouldn't feel very comfortable, but you're supposed to sit still. It's all about the posture. It's all about the functionality. So I think maybe something new to him for Chinese, a piece of Chinese furniture. And also you can see the frame around the seat. In photography, people talk about frame within a frame, the frame. So this is like the wood functions as the frame and as well as the content. So this is a very nice picture of a piece of furniture in Chinese culture. And then when we were in Chicago at the Art Museum, Dr. Zimmerwoman was drawn to the table installation created by Ai Weiwei. I think many people know Ai Weiwei, a Chinese artist who is now in Germany, lives in Germany. So Ai Weiwei collected a lot of old furniture and old building materials from old buildings in China, and he reassembled them to make them look familiar yet different to people. So for example, this is a dinner table, very typical, check two dinner tables here, but they're connected in this way. And so it's very interesting. In the Western culture, there's concept of round table. Round table is supposed to make all the knights gathering around the table feel that they are equal. There's no host side, there's no guest side. And dinner table in China is usually a square one. So there are 4 sides. Supposedly there'll be 8 people sitting around the dinner table, and we call it 8 God table. 八仙桌. So the 8 people are grandparents, parents, children, and grandchildren. So it's more the representation of family together around the dinner table. And Ai Weiwei, his craft, like, make the familiar object a little bit unfamiliar to people. And only when normal things are twisted, reassembled, deconstructed a little bit, can realize that, oh, there was a purpose. One things have to be created in a certain way, or make you think about what you consider as normal. It's just one of the millions of alternatives. So Dr. Zimmerwoman found this piece of installation, and we talked about it. And also, so I thought about furniture in linguistics. It's very interesting. So because I was working on a paper about Chinese nouns. Chinese nouns are considered as uncountable, like English, water or air, because English only uncountable nouns can be used in this way, like water is expensive. You cannot say book is expensive. But in Chinese, every noun can be used as an uncountable noun. You can't just say book is expensive, table is nice. So, but I realized that all the Chinese nouns behave differently, although they are all considered uncountable in Chinese. So I read an article about even among uncountable nouns in English, for example, different uncountable nouns will behave differently. So water is to behave differently from furniture, although they are both uncountable nouns. So in English, you can say the furniture is round. That's perfect. But you cannot say the water is large or the water is round. So that may feel that, well, so that makes me feel that probably some Chinese nouns behave like furniture, some Chinese nouns behave more like water. So it's interesting to consider how human beings consider furniture. In English, furniture is uncountable. You cannot say a furniture. You cannot say furnitures. But in French, for example, furniture is countable. You can say the furnitures. So it's interesting to see how we relate to furniture in our different disciplines. And also in furniture can be seen also in Professor Zhang's research on Chinese literati studio. So the furniture is the essential piece of the studio, and how people sit around it, what people do on it, what do they put on the table. And also Professor Yu Min had the picture of the makeshift classroom for migrant kids in their school. You know, the most important thing to have a school is to have furniture, a table and chairs. So just to give you a new understanding of furniture, with humanities, humanity and the furniture. It's from our own perspective, which I've never thought about before the collaboration. And also collaboration. So I stumbled upon this book on Amazon, The Reminiscence of Wayne. So talking about the history of development of Wayne State. So I found out the origin, the starting point of the College of Liberal Arts from 1942. It started an interdisciplinary program of humanities that drew faculty from different disciplines. So from the very beginning, the humanities and our college started as the idea of having the interdisciplinary nature. Okay, and okay, so this is the last piece, and it's very interesting. So just about 2 weeks ago, we were contacted by Professor Coloma of College of Education in the wake of the anti-Asian sentiment. He wanted to create a course on Intro to Asian Americans, and he contacted us because he attended some of our talks. So we are now still doing brainstorming to have a new course regarding Asian Americans. Maybe for the long run, we want to start a program on Asian Americans. So that's all what I have. It's all about the collaboration, the benefits, and the discoveries, surprising discoveries that you never thought about. Okay, thank you. And then I'll let Professor Zimmerwoman take over. You can share your screen. I'll stop share, okay?
All right. And then you just share a screen with the green box at the bottom.
Where's the slide share? Okay. I got out. I'm screwed. So can you hear me, Kennedy? So how do I missed the slide share.
Yes, I can hear you. So
That's
if you
at the
just
bottom?
exit out of your web, yeah. Yeah, exit out of your web browser and then click on the PowerPoint that you would like to present.
Oh, geez. No.
Yeah, just minimize it or exit out of it so
Yeah.
it's easier for you to
So then-
see where your
so
PowerPoint
then-
is.
No, I got, all right. I mean, I'd have to go for my screen like that. And then slide share.
So click on your PowerPoint, remember? All right, and then press play for slideshow.
But I got it from the, I don't see slide share.
So go to the play button at the top. All right, so click slideshow, the tab, and then it should be.
Okay, we practiced this, but
It's okay, take your time.
no, I don't. Oh, there it is. There it is.
Yes.
There it is. There it is. There it is. There it is.
Perfect,
Okay.
you are good to go.
Okay, thank you very much, Kennedy. It's been a
You're
pleasure
welcome.
to get to know you, and it's been a joy to work with Ha-Young, and these photographs, the bulk of them are made by Ha-Young, and this is the last class that I taught. It was an artist activism class, and I'm speaking to it because it was transitional about the sense of a psychological space, but it also was about the space. This was at a Humanities Centers conference, and we held this space outside, and it was addressing the psychological space of communication, of this rising awareness of our cultural shadow of narcissism, of language, and narcissists tend to speak in a certain language, and the core of language is very important to create a psychological dynamic. And so narcissists tend to deny, demand, deserve, and diagnose. And I was studying this because I was trying to forge tools, and I have strived to learn about conflict resolution for a long time, to communicate, to work with the younger faculty that I found very disconcerting to work with. So this is Sue Carmen. She's a performance artist, and she is actually the center unconditional agape love of abundance. And then we honored the centers, because the centers are the heart of Wayne State. And so these are all the names of the centers. So it's the Humanities Center, the Center for Latino and American Studies. And so we placed that and orchestrated that so we could photograph it. But it's to speak to this, because this is important to bring back into the curriculum the political theory and the sense of citizenship, so that we can have a common goal of striving towards becoming participatory local citizens. And so she's wearing a mirror dress. And so you see yourself in the mirror, just like when you come to someone, it's that I and thou relationship. And so, because Sue's performance is different than theater, because you interact with the audience. And so she had baked goods that people could take. So that was an interactive aspect. And then she was seeing the best in everyone. So she's the bountiful, mother that just sees is unconditionally loving. And then when people come up, they see themselves. And so they're confronted with themselves. And that speaks to projection. It speaks to how we have to be a clear, clean machine, so that we understand our own shadows, so that we can see others clearly. And it's been my honor to, when I was first introduced to Ha-Yung, when he joined a photography class, and he went through the introductory, through the many courses, and he's become a very good photographer, and he has a great eye. And so this is, you can see that how I'm reflected into the dress. And so it's a very interesting metaphor for the I and thou relationship. And the four aspects, like on top of just learning about narcissism, I was stunned how much it wasn't addressed within the administration or leadership within Wayne State University. And a colleague who teaches at University of Western Ontario told me that she teaches the toxic tetrad of leadership, and that's sadist, narcissism, Machiavellian, and psychopathy, because it's so common in business. And the higher you go up the ladder of power and prestige, the more representative it is. And so as I was struggling to understand this pathology, this is Grace, there 4 students volunteered to be those aspects. And so this is Grace, who's the Machiavellian, and she has her signature here of Machiavellian, and she chose money because greed. Much of this is part of these aberrated personalities, are part of the toxic oligarchic capitalist run to the extent degree, commodifying everything at the expense of humanity. And this is Nick, who's the narcissist, and he is wearing the American flag on his face. And Robert Bly, the poet, has long identified narcissism as the cultural shadow of the United States. And just recently, it has come to all of our attention because of the last administration. And as I was dealing with this, I was teaching the students about what I was learning. And so this performance concretized that dynamic. And this is Michael Seaton, who it was such a, it's so interesting because the 4 students who volunteered to be these pathologies were the most quiet, the most gentle, the most loving, courteous students. And they all said that it struck something in them, that they could find that expression. And so this is Michael being the psychopath. And then here's Michael. Our faces are obscuring it, but Michael's about to stab me. And this is the sharp, notice that the knife is sharp. So that's very strategic, that central is sharp, and then I'm out of focus. And so again, it's Ha-Yung's vision. And then Azam was the sadist, and Azam is very sweet and very gentle. And he said that when he had that whip that he was throwing around and he was snapping it at other people in the audience, because it was out in space and the whole campus was our audience, that he identified with the shadow of the sadist, of the power that gave him, because he's a he's diminutive, he's in nature, and he's very quiet. And he said he delighted and how when he snapped that whip, everybody scattered. And he had shared that revelatory moment. And I wish our photographs we didn't, because this is a really interesting composition. And so Nick and Michael became very good friends in this process. And so this really forged a real connection between students. And in these classes where was art as activism, where we are addressing collectively and collaborating, they keep connections long after the class. And so that's my partner Ken photographing them, and the four of them became friends that sustained after the class. And so this is down low looking up, and then here's Hyun in his full gear. And so I really wanted to acknowledge him, because in the process, and they say a visionary leader is compassionate, and that in the pedagogy of the oppressed, Paulo Freire speaks to education being a shared investigative journey straight across, where teacher and student are each the other. And in my first introduction with Hyun, he is, as in his role as director and all his roles of leadership, he's so clear and so embracive and inclusive. And then as a student, he was right across with the students, and he would have that same dynamic. And in his humility, that's what would make that space where everybody could speak. And so he never dominated the space. He always animated it. And so the end of this is about my losing my voice as an empath, as I was really, really, truly overwhelmed with that. It seems to not to target a certain group, but it seems like there's a sense of my age group, and then millennials are more philosophically aligned in terms of revolutionary change making and entitlement. And then there was like that group became more neoliberal, coming through the coming of age during the Reagan Bush era, where they got even parents of children at that time say it was like a virus about the greed, about the professionalism, and about the bureaucracy, about what success was. So it's that age group that tends to have that more toxic language. And so now you can see what a serious photographer Hyun is. And we continue to share a lot about that discipline. And so everyone got involved, and this was I was truly bound up. I lost, as an empath, I got so overwhelmed, not understanding. And in this dynamic of narcissism being the cultural shadow, there's more empaths being born, and we're becoming aware that I really, truly did lose my voice. And so this was emblematic of that. So this was the beginning of my own transformation and my resurrection, because I named it, because I started to see how much students appreciated learning about this dynamic, how we need to address it. I talked to Laura Lee Keishley about, if she's the expert in bully, she needs to know about this dynamic. And this was also just a year after 45, I name him by the number, was elected. So this is then my joy in this celebrative dynamic. Really, it was a true dynamism in a collaboration with all the students. And MAME showed up, so a lot of my friends showed up to see it. And so all this was operating outside of the conference of the Humanities Center conference. And at the wall nearby of our, just on Jewel, in our neighborhood, is this plus and equal 3. So this is the dynamic about love, about partnership, about when you're really clearly fused. It's like opens up into like a larger totality of a humanity. And we're in this holographic universe where what happens to one happens to all. And that real sense of that highest sense of love in all relationships are so inclusive and just animates everything about your life, and life speeds by. And so this is, in closing, that because after teaching since 2012 to when I retired, art is activism, and also how I always brought that sense of a humanity to the classroom, that it was constellating community in the classroom. That what you can do with a photography degree, is one of my students is a Colombian Indian, and by day he's a reporter, he's an interpreter for the courts, and by night he bought a 40-acre goat farm in Oxford, Michigan, and he runs indigenous ceremony in the heart of the most populated hate groups of northern Michigan, because I have that map from the Southern Poverty Law Center. And so by night and weekends, he does ceremony on his land, and then he travels to North, Central, South America, which is when you do ceremony, it's the spine to the earth, anchoring it, and the vibrations are raised, because we're in this moment where we have to raise the vibrations because all the institutions are fractured. So I met this young man who started this, bought this building, and I told him there was a grant for city development because he wanted to make it a community center. And so I met him in Michigan at Alfonso's, and we met, and I saw his place, and I noted this grant. He said, I noted that grant too. And so he put all his work in it. This is his plans. And then I brought the academic language to it, and we wrote a City of Chicago development grant, and we got it, and it's $250,000. And that's because I went to ceremony at one of my first students. So with a photo degree, you can be a medicine man. And then I went to, this is the opening, because it was the COVID hit, and we all had to wear masks, and his family and friends came, and we wrote on the walls to bless it. And this is what you do when you move into a new house, or when you're into an old house and you're going to paint the walls, is that may the protection of the ancestors be yours. May it be so, Ashe, all my relations. So you put all the affirmations and the love using language, words. Words have power, and then you paint over it, and then the spirit of it keeps the energy of the house and that intention in it. And so then I went to Chinatown here yesterday because I needed to do something concrete. And I'm a dragon, and I had never gone to Chinatown, and was inspired to only because of Hyung bringing the students. And so now I feel like it's something to mine, and it's very interesting. This is the mouse. It's the rat. I found it really interesting because it's so abstracted. So they have the Chinese astrology sculptures, and I'm a dragon. And then I asked Hyung. Hyung said he's a mouse. And I looked it up, and mouse, rat, and dragon get along very well, and they're really good business partners, they said. And then the shops, I was looking at that, and this is a money tree, but it's about the I and thou relationship, and it's got my cast reflection, the silhouette of my over it, so it looks like this face. And so if you're looking through your own projections, and if they're toxic, then you don't see that other person, you see something very aberrated. So you have to be clear to observe the other. And I'm wearing this observer shirt. And this is a money tree. And then so it's that sense of the gold is when you really work on growing your soul and become very conscious and know thyself, so that you can see others clearly and be that love. And then they have these murals that speak to the diversity of the people. So this is in Chinatown, and there's the Statue of Liberty. And then in this extended mural, there's a bridge, and then there's these people around it. And I wanted to photograph this because of the symbolism, because there was also this that just was recently put there, and it says, "Stop hate, no more silence and violence against Asians." And I needed to photograph it and end it with this, because to that development about the class addressing American Asians and speaking to a larger dialogue, because there's no one that you cannot love once you know their story. And part of the healing is knowing the history of what Asian Americans and Asians have brought to this, and that their culture, and that this book is what I suggest that everybody read, and that this book may be indeed part of that, may I humbly suggest, part of that curriculum, because by Resmaa Menakem, it's My Grandmother's Hands, Racialized Trauma and the Pathway of Mending Our Hearts and Bodies, because he also has a curriculum and resources and his own videos that concretize the ability to see from the point of view of white Black culture police. And I learned about how to have compassion for police because I have a relative that is very toxic that I find, and he's a bully, but that in the training of being a policeman, that their bodies are traumatized. And then of course, Black carry the trauma of generations past in their bodies. And then for all of us, we have that generational memory. And so it's in our bodies. And so he gives us concrete tools. And I hope to be involved in this however we can, because they have a 100-book deal. And I'm fascinated by this. And I'd like to digest it with this community. So I thank you for the long, collaborative, collegial friendship with Hyung that's been so rich, and with the students. And Randy's here. And Randy was, he's listening. And I don't know if he can hear me, but
Hi.
Are you where, Randy? Randy.
I'm there.
Hey, so I wanted to acknowledge Randy because Randy came up to the 4th floor, and that's how we met. I was on the 4th floor and he appeared at the end of the hall. and I said, hey, and he ignored me. And I said, why are you ignoring me? Aren't you going to be polite and at least say hi? And he said, well, I'm so overwhelmed. There's so much at us all the time. And do you want to speak to this, Randy? Do you want to say what you came to the 4th floor for?
Oh, I actually, it's interesting when I think of it, because I remember kind of like wandering around this building at Wayne State, Old Main, this building, but I was kind of just like lost and kind of looking for something, and I kind of got introduced to Marilyn randomly, and we ended up talking about kind of life and just the community that she had like kind of developed from being a professor, where it wasn't just like this kind of academic like grades based thing. It was more of like her actually teaching us more about life through photography. And we had like this amazing dinner. We talked for hours, and then I ended up taking one of her courses, and she's kind of been my mentor, leading me through life for 5 years. So
I was graced with a space where I had a lot of sinks. And so I transformed one of the rooms into a kitchen. And so I admonished him for not being polite. And then I invited him to dinner, and we had dinner, and we spent the entire evening. And so then he majored in photography, as well as he had other also interests, and we've stayed friends, and it has been an active relationship when he was able to access Hyung's class. So I wanted him to be here to speak to that. It was my honor that he came searching, because in an over-rationalized world, our intuitive is the only true barometer. And he asked a question, and I was honored to answer it. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so that concludes the Brown Bag presentation. We still are gonna save a couple minutes for some Q&As. If you stop sharing your screen, it'll be easier for us to call on individuals. All right, so if you have any questions, we'll stay on for a couple minutes so that our hosts can answer them. And feel free to raise your hand, unmute your mic, or post any questions in the chat. All right, John, you can unmute your mic.
Yes, very intriguing. I was intrigued by when the presentation was made by Professor Liu about he had mentioned Seiji Ozawa, the famous composer who was born in China but was Japanese, and that got me to thinking about that relationship, the Chinese and the Japanese, and that whole complexity, because I know there's a long involved history there, but that was a surprise that there were Japanese living in China. And that got me to, sort of going off in all sorts of directions. But I'm curious what he makes of that. How do we properly understand that? And does that add to our confusion with regard to the whole thing about with the Asian racist situation, etc.?
Okay, yeah, it's some history I should have explained, because when he was born, Shenyang is part of Manchuria, and that's the empire, the Japanese wanted to build Shenyang with the capital city in Manchuria. So he was born in Manchuria in Shenyang, and after the war he returned to Japan. So his first language actually was Chinese, the conductor. And but you mean the tension between the Chinese and Japanese? Is that what you meant? Yeah, yeah, we do. I'm not a political scientist or a historian, but indeed we have ups and downs in the relationship with our neighboring country, or the Professor Yu and other people can add to that. It's a complicated relationship. It's a love and hate relationship between China and Japan.
And I can jump in too. Thank you, John, for the good question. And I think that really speaks to complexity right now as we building across different Asian communities, across different ethnic groups to build correlations in solidarities against the anti-Asian racism. And again, and I will just finish presenting in my MA education. So we have the American Educational Research Association annual meeting. We just finished presenting this past week. And one of the things we have talked about, a group of Asian scholars have talked about among us, is to be able to address this hate. We really have to address the internal conflicts, and not to say like Chinese people against Japanese people or Japanese people against Chinese people, but the more complex way is like we have to also look at the history, right? You refer to the Japanese invasion of Asian countries during World War II, and that is really the history we cannot overlook. But that also adds the layers of the older Asians in the United States, for example, are not one group, right? Like we're from different part of the Asian country. We have different history in terms of colonial history, in terms of imperial history, in terms of the conflicts relationship between one another. But I think the highlights of today's talk actually connect to our talk is the space, either through time or current space, actually allowed us to really look at our differences, but find our similarities. Like, yes, we are coming from such a different and diverse background, but at the same time, we enter the space. Like, I really appreciate Professor Zimmerwoman talk about the performance, and then also the work that she had done with her students, and Haiyung's work in Yunshang too. Like, we are doing in our own field to really reflect what this term space means and how to bring the history and conflicts, but really transfer those into hope and love, because that's how we can move forward. Thank you.
It's my understanding that Korean too, like with all that there's a hierarchy, and so my friends in computer science tend to have more international students, and so they collide more, and so the Asians collide, and there's like they exercise that hierarchy in the dynamic of that class. And there was a whole history of Japan, which was interesting to watch, because they've had a long history of real military, a strong sense of a military in their culture, so that to unify, there was a lot of fierce warring that to unify it in the first place. And so I saw how that would then, just even though it was another century, that spirit move into the next century with World War II. So that kind of generational ancestry of what definitions of what it is of masculinity and is deep. And so these are much more porous times, and time gets collapsed. And so our sense of ancestry becomes much more palpable and lived and present. And the spiritual and all the science, all those boundaries are permeable now. And in my own dreams, I've had ancestors show up and comfort me. And so this is like a huge moment that mystics and literati have anticipated, and we either raise the bar of love, or else we're really going to be allowed to become extinct as we have made the species extinct. So this is the time. We've prepared all our lives for this moment. And 40 years is a cycle of revolution. And I'm on the other end of that. I was thinking 40 years from now, I'll be 110. So I have to be in on this one. And I'm excited about Randy. Randy's graduating and what his plans are and what that involves. And so hopefully in Detroit, there's that sense that he can stay connected with the communities that have been forged from the people that he knows from the classes. And there's one of the students started a solar farm business. Okay, so he makes solar panels with his brother, and he contacted me. Who can I donate a dozen solar panels that aren't perfect, but they have some defects, so I can donate them to a school. So I connected him with the Boggs School, and so Boggs School is forged from Grace Lee Boggs, teaching for generations about how to be a cultural change agent. So it's a very rich environment.
Thank you so much. So it's 1:41. I know we went over time, but before we leave, I know Dr. Edwards has some words, but quickly on behalf of the Humanities Center and all of our presenters today, thank you so much for a well-crafted presentation, and the pictures were beautiful. It was definitely a treat, a midday treat to see this. And we're so happy that the Humanities Center can offer you the platform to share this research and to share your work. And again, as a small token of our gratitude, we do have a couple gifts for all of our presenters. It's a journal and a mask with the Humanities Center logo on it that we hope you all wear with pride. We'll be connecting with each of the presenters individually to safely get these gifts to you in these COVID times. But thank you so much. And if you have any closing remarks, Dr. Edwards, and then we'll have our speakers give some closing remarks before we go. Unmute your mic.
Yes, just to thank the presenters. And I'm wondering if the group ever thought of publishing the proceedings from that summer institute. I mean, as Hayun spoke, I was reminded of the way in which these talks coalesced around the idea of space and the two cities. And so if you were to get somebody to have a good introduction and so on, and a preface from the consortium's representative, which would be the Humanities Institute, Humanities Center, and then you know, that's something to consider. I mean, it's not so long ago that these talks were given. It's 2019, and maybe the Wayne State University Press might be interested. Something to think about. But anyway, thank you all, I mean, for coming, and I hope that that you would consider those people who are in the audience and our faculty members. We are recruiting now for the 2021-22 Brumback series. So do consider signing up. Kennedy usually puts the sign up form in the chat, so you might consider that. But thank you all for coming.
And it's very nice to meet everybody. And happy graduation, Randy.
Happy graduation.
I hope to see you again, Ben and Liana. Hope to connect. And Kennedy, thank you for all your work. And Hayung, it's always an honor. Walter, nice to be at your home.
All right, well, that concludes our presentation. Thank you all so much, and stay safe. And we have one last brown bag next week. So same time, same place. You all have a good one.
Thank you. Thank you, Kennedy.
You're welcome.
Dr. Edwards.
Thank you very much.